The laughter came first, loud, sharp and mocking, cutting through the steady drone of the aircraft. A group of young football players had spotted him. A black man in a faded jacket and worn shoes, sitting quietly by the window, his head slightly bowed. To them, he didn't belong in their world. Not here, not on this flight. "Yo, look at this dude," one of them sneered, loud enough for half the row to hear. "Man looks like he can't even afford the ticket." The others erupted in cruel chuckles, tossing glances back at their target. The man didn't lift his eyes. He didn't defend himself. He sat still, hands clasped together, as if their words didn't matter. But the tension in the air thickened instantly, pulling other passengers into the moment. Some turned their faces away. Some bit their lips, uneasy. But no one spoke up. The humiliation was hanging there, raw and ugly, as the players pushed it further. "Bet he's on his way to ask for a job," another one joked, grinning at his teammates. "Nah," a third chimed in. "He's probably cleaning planes when we land." More laughter. More humiliation. The man's silence was heavy. Not weak, not fearful. Heavy, like the calm before a storm. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. It was as if he was holding back something none of them could yet see. Outside the window, clouds swallowed the aircraft as it climbed higher, the cabin lights dimming. Inside, the imbalance of power was clear. A group of young men riding high on arrogance, and one quiet figure bearing their ridicule with unshakable patience. And while they saw only a poor, tired traveller, what they didn't see was the truth. That man was not just another passenger. That man was about to change their lives forever. The laughter continued, echoing in the narrow cabin, but the stage had already been set for a reversal none of them could imagine. Because the man they mocked, it would soon stand before them as someone they could never have humiliated again. The laughter didn't fade. It grew bolder. What began as a few whispers soon turned into open ridicule that rippled through the row of football players like a cruel inside joke. "Look at his shoes, man," one of them said, pointing with a smirk. "Those things probably walked through 3 decades. Another leaned across the aisle, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hey, brother, they don't sell new clothes where you're from?" The cabin filled with uneasy chuckles from the group, but outside their circle, the silence of the other passengers spoke louder. Some avoided eye contact, staring at their seatback screens as if the movie previews could drown out the sound. Others exchanged nervous glances, their faces tight with discomfort. But no one said a word. And there he sat, the man in the worn jacket. He didn't answer. He didn't even lift his head. His eyes stayed fixed forward, calm but unyielding, as though their words were nothing more than passing turbulence. Yet in that quiet gaze, there was something deeper, a trace of pain, yes, but also patience. The players mistook it for weakness. "Yo, what if he's sitting here because he couldn't get into first class?" one joked, nudging his teammate. Another burst out laughing. "First class? Bro, this guy couldn't even get into a high school locker room." Their words hit hard, echoing through the cabin. The sting was real, the humiliation sharp. But the man still didn't react. His silence seemed to irritate them more, like a game they couldn't win. The tension thickened. Every insult was a test, every chuckle a jab, and through it all he remained steady, like someone who had already lived through storms far stronger than childish cruelty. What no one realized, not the passengers, not the smirking athletes, was that this silence was not surrender. It was restraint. The kind of restraint only a man with true power carries. And soon, that power would reveal itself in a way they could never laugh at again. But for now, the cabin was filled with their mockery, and his silence was the only answer they would get. They saw a man in worn shoes and a faded jacket. But behind those quiet eyes was a story far greater than any of them could imagine. Flashback. Years earlier, he was on a dusty practice field at sunrise. A whistle hung from his neck, his voice cutting across the air as he drilled young athletes harder than they had ever been pushed. "Discipline wins games," he barked, "not talent. Talent fades. Discipline lasts." His words weren't just orders. They were lessons he lived by every single day. This man had grown up with little. Poverty was his constant shadow, and life never handed him the easy road. But instead of breaking him, the struggle forged him into something stronger. While others chased status and luxury, he embraced simplicity. His clothes were plain, his lifestyle modest. Not because he had nothing, but because he needed nothing. His wealth was built in character, not cash. He had coached under pressure, shaped rookies into leaders, and turned broken teams into champions. Yet in every victory, he reminded his players of one thing: respect is earned by how you treat people, not by how you look walking into a room. The screen shifts back to the present, inside the airplane cabin. His stillness isn't weakness, it's control. Every insult tossed his way is just another test of patience, and patience is something he's mastered. While the players laugh, the audience now sees the truth. This man is no ordinary passenger. He is a leader, a strategist, a mentor who has carried young men to glory on the field and taught them to carry themselves with dignity off it. And the cruel irony? The very athletes mocking him were about to become his. The laughter in the plane continues, but underneath it, the suspense is building. Because the man they underestimated is about to reveal the insults didn't die down. They only grew louder. By now, the football players weren't whispering. They wanted the whole cabin to hear. Their voices carried over the drone of the engines, their laughter bouncing off the cramped walls like a cruel chant. One leaned back in his seat, grinning. "Man, you see that jacket? Looks like it came straight out of a thrift store bin." Another smirked, pointing across the aisle. "Nah, bro, even a thrift store would have rejected that thing." The group howled with laughter, drawing glances from passengers who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A mother covered her child's ears. A businessman tightened his jaw, clearly disgusted but unwilling to step in. The cabin air was heavy, thick with unspoken disapproval. Still, the man in the worn clothes said nothing. He didn't blink. He didn't break. His silence felt deliberate, almost defiant, and that unsettled them in ways they didn't understand. "Bet this guy's never even touched a football," one of them scoffed, puffing out his chest. "Takes real skill to do what we do. He wouldn't last a second on the field." "Skill?" another chimed in, slapping his teammate's shoulder. "We're about to have our best season ever, bro. Undefeated. You already know." They began boasting loudly about their training camp, their strength, their guaranteed victories. They bragged about fame, money, and the bright future they were certain awaited them. And with every arrogant word, their mockery circled back to the quiet man at the window. To them, he was the opposite of success, a living example of what they thought they'd never become. But to the other passengers, watching closely now, his silence was no longer weakness. It was strange, powerful, commanding even, as if he knew something they didn't. And he did. Because while they measured greatness by money and medals, his definitity, iron of success, was far deeper, and soon he would show them. The laughter continued, but underneath it, tension coiled tighter and tighter. The plane was descending. The moment of truth was drawing near, and the next word spoken would change everything. The seatbelt sign chimed, and the plane jolted as it touched down. Wheels screeched against the runway, a chorus of gasps and shifting luggage filling the cabin. Relief washed over the passengers, another safe landing. But for some, the story was only beginning. The football players were still laughing, still puffed up with their own arrogance. They grabbed their backpacks, slapped each other on the shoulders, and cracked jokes about their mystery passenger one last time. "Man, he's probably headed straight to the bus stop," one muttered, smirking. "Or the soup kitchen," another added, sending the group into another round of chuckles. The quiet man by the window remained steady, hands folded. He didn't rush to unbuckle, didn't scramble for his bag. He simply waited, calm, patient, almost expectant. Then it happened. As passengers began to rise and shuffle into the aisle, a flight attendant approached, not just with routine courtesy, but with something else. Respect. She bent slightly toward him, her voice warm and sincere. "Coach Daniels," she said softly with a smile, "congratulations on your new position. The staff wanted me to personally welcome you to the city." The cabins stilled. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The players froze in place, their laughter dying instantly. "Coach?" Murmurs rippled through the rows like a wave. Passengers glanced at each other, eyebrows raised, eyes widening. A few leaned closer, whispering in disbelief. The man they had mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed was being addressed as coach. The players looked at each other, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. "Wait, did she just say coach?" one whispered, his voice suddenly small. The man finally lifted his gaze, calm and unshaken. Meeting the stunned eyes around him, he gasped, with the flight attendant a polite nod. Nothing more. No gloating, no smirk. Just quiet acknowledgement. The players' arrogance cracked, replaced by an unease they couldn't hide. Something didn't add up. Something was about to change. Because the man they had humiliated was not who they thought he was. And as they stepped off the plane, the truth waiting at the gate would leave them speechless. The airport doors slid open, and the humid air of the tarmac rushed in. Passengers spilled out, dragging their carry-ons, eager to disappear into the crowd. But for the group of football players, everything slowed. Their laughter was gone, their confidence had cracked, and then they saw it. Ahead, near the terminal entrance, stood a small welcoming committee, staff members holding signs with bold letters that read, "Welcome, Coach Daniels." The man they had mocked for the entire flight walked forward calmly, his worn shoes striking the ground with measured steps. No rush, no need to prove himself. His very presence spoke louder than any insult thrown his way. The players froze in disbelief, their whispers tumbled out clumsily. "Wait! No way! That can't be him! Coach! Our coach!" Their arrogance drained from their faces, replaced with wide-eyed shock. The pieces began to click together. The flight attendant's words, the passenger's murmurs, his silence, his composure. It all made sense now. The man they had dismissed as poor was the man who held their futures in his hands. Staff members stepped forward with outstretched hands and genuine smiles. "Coach, it's an honor to finally meet you," one said. Cameras flashed as someone captured the moment. Every gesture, every greeting, treated him not as a passenger, but as a leader. And the players? They could only stand there, rooted to the spot, their pride collapsing under the weight of realization. The man turned slightly, his calm eyes meeting theirs for the first time since the flight. He didn't gloat. The sting of shame still lingered, but with it came determination. Then, with a sharp clap of his hands, he ended the silence. "Now, let's get to work." Cut to the practice field. The sun was high, the grass glistening with morning dew. Whistles blew, helmets clashed, sweat poured. And there, walking the sidelines with unshakable calm, was Coach Daniels. The same man once laughed at in the cramped cabin was now commanding a team of athletes who hung on his every word. His presence reshaped the field, transforming arrogance into effort, disrespect into drive. And as the camera pulled back, The image was clear. True leadership isn't about appearance. It's about character, discipline, and the strength to rise above humiliation without losing your dignity. The players had learned their lesson. The coach had set the tone. And a new season, one built on respect, had just begun. Because greatness isn't in what you wear. It's in how you live.